They carved me up like a holiday turkey, sharing the pieces between their new, perfect families, but forgot to give me a plate. Left on the sidelines, watching through smudged windows as my half-siblings got the hugs, the attention, the easy belonging that was denied to me in stereo, I learned a bitter truth. Sometimes the people meant to love you the most only see you as a scheduling conflict. But they didn't know that the quiet, lonely girl they overlooked was listening, watching, and storing every single slight. Not for vengeance, but for a fire I'd later build. A fire fueled by the very neglect that tried to consume me. A fire that would eventually shine so bright it would force them to finally see. My childhood was a study in contrasts, a jarring back and forth between two lives where I was always the asterisk, the footnote. Monday morning, Mom, Emily, would drop me at the curb, her eyes already scanning for Daniel, her son with Mark, her new husband. I'd watch her drive away, a knot forming in my stomach, knowing I was heading to Dad's, David. Dad's life, with Carol and my half-sisters, Jessica and Megan, was a whirlwind of matching outfits, soccer practice, and family dinners that felt less like gatherings and more like staged performances I was meant to observe from the periphery. David and Emily, divorced when I was 4, an amicable split, they called it. It didn't feel very amicable when I was the one being packed like luggage every other weekend. My little heart trying to grasp why my world was now in two pieces that didn't fit together anymore. Before we move forward with our story, please take a quick moment to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot. At Dad's, the house smelled like Carol's expensive perfume and something vaguely like disappointment whenever I spilled juice or spoke without being prompted. Jessica and Megan, blonde and boisterous, were the suns around which that household orbited. Everything was about them, their school projects, their scraped knees, their endless chatter at the dinner table. I was Sarah, the quiet older sister, who didn't quite belong. They had their own bedrooms, decorated exactly how they liked. Mine was a pull-out couch in the den, folded away during the day as if to erase my temporary presence. Carol was polite, overly so. Her smiles felt brittle, like they might break if I asked for too much. She'd ask about school with a tone that suggested she wasn't really listening, already turning back to Jessica's latest drawing or Megan's attempt at tying her shoelaces. Dad was present, physically. He'd ruffle my hair, ask if I was being a good girl. But his eyes, too, were usually fixed on his other daughters, the ones who fit seamlessly into the life he'd chosen after me. I remember one time, Jessica was crying because she'd dropped her ice cream. Dad scooped her up, murmuring comforts, while I sat beside them, invisible, my own cone melting ignored in my hand. It wasn't just one moment. It was 1,000 tiny instances that built a wall around my heart. Then, Sunday evening, Dad would drive me back across town to Mom's. Her house, while less overtly polished than Dad's, had its own dynamic that excluded me. Mark was kind enough, but he was Daniel's dad. Daniel was younger, a sweet, chubby little boy who occupied Mom's every waking thought. Mom was less stressed than Carol, but her attention was just as divided. She'd hug me tight when I arrived, tell me she missed me, but her focus would quickly shift back to Daniel's nap schedule, his feeding, his latest milestone. Our time together felt rushed, crammed into the weekdays I was there. There were moments, stolen hours when Daniel was asleep or occupied, where Mom would try to connect, but they were often interrupted by Mark needing something, or Daniel waking up. I felt like a guest on a tight itinerary, expected to be low maintenance, and grateful for the crumbs of attention I received. Daniel had his room, his toys, his established routine. I had a bed set up in the spare room, my few belongings always packed and ready for the next transition. Neither house felt like home. At Dad's, I was the ghost of a past life he seemed eager to move on from. At Mom's, I was a reminder of a life, before Daniel, a life she was happy with now. The constant shuttling, The feeling of being a visitor in the lives of the people who were supposed to be my family bred a profound and isolating loneliness. I was a satellite orbiting two different planets, never quite landing on either. School was just another place to be quiet and unseen. I had friends, but I never felt like I could fully explain the fractured nature of my life. How do you tell your classmates that your dad barely looks at you, or that your mom seems happier with her new son? It felt like complaining about having two families, which sounded spoiled even to me, even though it felt like having none. The only place that felt remotely like belonging was Aunt Lucy's. She was Mom's older sister, a vibrant, slightly eccentric woman who lived in a small, cluttered house filled with books and art supplies. Aunt Lucy didn't have children, and she welcomed me with an open heart and open arms. There were no half-siblings vying for attention, no step-parents navigating awkward dynamics, just Lucy and me. At Lucy's, I wasn't Sarah, the complicated child from the divorce. I was just Sarah. She listened when I talked, really listened, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. She taught me how to paint, how to bake cookies without burning them, and how to find magic in the everyday. Her house smelled like cinnamon and paint thinner, a comforting, real smell. She had a spare room that was mine when I was there, filled with her old books and a comfortable armchair. It felt like a place where I could just be, without trying to fit into someone else's picture. It was at Aunt Lucy's, curled up in that armchair, that I discovered writing. She had stacks of old notebooks, and one rainy afternoon, bored, I picked one up. I started writing about my day, about the ache in my chest, about the conversations I wished I could have had. It was clumsy, at first hesitant, but soon, the words flowed, a torrent of pent-up emotions finding their way onto the page. Writing became my sanctuary. In the quiet space between the lines, I could build worlds where I belonged, families where I was cherished, and characters who felt the same invisible pain I did. My notebooks became my most trusted companions, holding all the secrets and feelings I couldn't share with anyone else. I wrote about the silence at Dad's dinner table, the forced smiles at Mom's, the longing for a place where I wasn't just visiting, Aunt Lucy noticed. She saw me hunched over my notebooks, scribbling furiously. She didn't pry, but one day she left a brand new journal on my desk, a beautiful one with a thick leather cover. "For your stories, sweet pea," she said, her smile warm. "Keep filling them up." Encouraged by her quiet support, I started writing more than just diary entries. I wrote short stories, fantastical tales where lonely heroines found their voice and built their own kingdoms. I wrote poems that tried to capture the precise ache of being overlooked. When my English teacher announced a school-wide writing contest, a knot of fear and excitement twisted in my stomach. Could I share this part of me, the part I kept so hidden? With Aunt Lucy's gentle encouragement, I polished one of my stories, a piece about a girl who felt like a ghost in her own life. I submitted it, my hands trembling. And then, I won. First place. They read excerpts at the school assembly, and hearing my words read aloud, words that came from the deepest, most vulnerable part of me, was terrifying and exhilarating. People came up to me afterward, telling me how much they liked my story, how it resonated with them. For the first time, something I had created, something that came directly from my experience of loneliness, connected with others. It wasn't just a sanctuary anymore. It was a bridge. This success fueled something in me. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to be seen, a way to turn my pain into something meaningful. I started submitting to other contests, regional and even national. Ones for young writers, I won more. Each award, each letter of praise, was a small stone added to the foundation of my confidence, a foundation I was building entirely on my own. College was a chance to escape the constant gravitational pull of my two non-homes. I majored in creative writing, throwing myself into my studies. My professors recognized something in my work, the raw emotion, the sharp observations drawn from a lifetime of watching from the edges. I wrote my thesis, a novel, pouring everything I had felt and experienced into it. It wasn't a literal retelling, but the emotional truth of my childhood, the feeling of being split and discarded, was the beating heart of the story. It was about a young woman navigating a fractured family, searching for belonging. Graduation came, and I landed a small but promising book deal based on my thesis novel. The editing process was intense, pushing me to refine my voice, to make the story sing. I chose a pen name, wanting a degree of separation, but my author, photo was me, unmistakably. Then the book came out. The Satellite Girl. The title itself was a nod to how I'd always felt. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Critics praised its emotional depth, its poignant portrayal of family dynamics, and the search for identity. It resonated with readers. It climbed the bestseller lists. My quiet, internal sanctuary had become a loud, public success. The first call came from Dad. I hadn't spoken to him in months, maybe a year. Our conversations had dwindled to infrequent, awkward pleasantries. "Sarah? Is that really you?" His voice sounded different, laced with an unfamiliar eagerness. "Dad," I replied, my voice neutral. "Sarah, your book." "The Satellite Girl." Carol saw it in the bookstore. She said the author photo, "Well, it looks just like you. Is it yours?" There was a pause, a beat where I could almost hear his mind racing. Sarah? My Sarah? The quiet one? A published author? A best-selling author? "Yes, Dad. It's mine." "Sarah, that's incredible. We are so proud of you." The words tumbled out, a rapid-fire string of congratulations that felt hollow, detached from any genuine connection we'd had. "Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were writing a book." "Didn't tell them? Why would I?" They had never shown any real interest in the quiet girl who wrote stories in her room. My successes in high school were met with brief, distracted nods. Why would they care about this? "It wasn't something I discussed," I said simply. "Well, we have to celebrate. You have to come over. Carol is making your favorite. You remember, her famous lasagna." "My favorite? Carol's lasagna?" I hadn't had Carol's lasagna in years. It wasn't my favorite. It was probably Jessica's or Megan's. The invitation felt like a clumsy attempt to insert themselves into my newfound success, to claim a piece of the spotlight. "That's kind of you, Dad. But I'm really busy right now with promotions." It wasn't entirely a lie. My schedule was packed. "Oh. Well, soon though, right? We'd love to see you. The girls are so excited. Jessica and Megan, excited about my book." The idea was laughable. They barely knew I existed beyond the holidays. The call ended with promises of future connection that I had no intention of keeping, at least not on their terms. Then Mom called. Her reaction was different, more effusive, and perhaps slightly more genuine, but still tinged with that same unfamiliar enthusiasm that screamed, "Bestseller author daughter." "Sarah, oh my darling, your Aunt Lucy told me. A book, a published book. I'm just bursting with pride." Aunt Lucy. Of course. She was the one person I had shared my writing journey with. The one person who had believed in me unconditionally. She wouldn't have told them to gloat, but because she was genuinely proud and probably thought I'd want them to know. "Thanks, Mom. I read the article about you in the paper. You look so beautiful. And the book sounds wonderful. I must get a copy." "Aunt Lucy probably has one," I said, a hint of dryness in my voice. "Oh. Right. Yes. Well, you have to come over. Mark and Daniel would love to see you. Daniel is getting so big you wouldn't believe it." Same script, different parent. My success was the reason they were reaching out. a sudden catalyst for connection where years of my quiet existence hadn't been enough. It was the karma I hadn't actively sought, but that had arrived nonetheless. They had overlooked me when I was small and vulnerable, and now, when I was standing tall and successful, they wanted back in. The revenge wasn't about tearing them down or making them suffer. It was about the quiet, undeniable power of my independence. It was about having the strength to look them in the eye, not as the needy child craving their attention, but as the woman who had built her own world, despite their neglect. The requests for visits continued. Eventually, Aunt Lucy gently suggested that maybe, just maybe, talking to them wouldn't hurt. That perhaps they needed to understand the impact of their choices. She wasn't pushing for reconciliation, just acknowledging that sometimes airing grievances is part of healing. I agreed to meet Mom and Mark for lunch. It felt surreal sitting across from them in a public restaurant, not their kitchen. Mom was beaming, talking about my book to the waitress. Mark offered awkward congratulations. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I could finally say the things I had only ever written in my journals. Mom, Mark, I started, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands under the table. Thank you for lunch, and for reaching out. Mom's smile wavered slightly. Of course, darling. We're so happy you're doing so well. It's funny, I continued, looking directly at Mom. All those years, I felt like I was living two separate lives, but neither one felt like my life. I was always the visitor, the one who didn't quite fit. Mom's face fell. Sarah, what do you mean? I mean, at Dad's, it was all about Jessica and Megan. I was just there. And here, with you and Mark, it was always about Daniel. I understand he was younger, he needed more, but I needed a mom too. I needed to feel like I belonged, not just when it was convenient. The words, once bottled up and overflowing only onto paper, felt surprisingly strong as I spoke them aloud. Mom's eyes welled up. Oh, Sarah, I didn't realize. I thought we were doing the best we could. Maybe you were, I acknowledged. But the best you could do felt like leaving me on the outside looking in. It felt lonely, Mom. Really, really lonely. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, we never intended to make you feel that way. We care about you. I know you probably didn't intend it, I said. But that was the effect. And it shaped me. It made me the person I am today. The conversation was raw, uncomfortable, and necessary. I didn't shout or blame. I simply stated my truth. The truth that had lived inside me for so long. I talked about the awkward visits, the feeling of being a burden, the constant comparison. Mom cried, apologizing, her voice thick with emotion. Mark seemed genuinely taken aback, perhaps never having fully grasped the child's perspective in their new family unit. I left that lunch feeling drained but lighter. I hadn't sought an apology, but receiving one, however imperfect, was a step. Meeting with Dad and Carol was a different kind of confrontation. Less emotional, more formal. We met at their pristine house. Jessica and Megan were there, polite but clearly unsure how to act around this successful author, who was also their half-sister they barely knew. Again, the effusive praise for the book, the awkward attempts at making conversation about my life. Dad, I said, cutting through the small talk. We need to talk about the past. Dad looked surprised, then guarded. The past? What about it? About how I felt growing up, I stated calmly. About coming here and feeling like I was interrupting your real family. About always being the extra person, the one who didn't quite fit. Carol's brittle smile was firmly in place. Sarah, that's not fair. We always welcomed you here. You welcomed me as a guest, Carol, I corrected gently, but firmly. Not as a daughter. Not as part of the family you built. Jessica and Megan had their lives, their routines, their place. Mine was on a pull-out couch. Dad started to protest. "Sarah, that's a harsh way to put it. We did the best we could. Divorce is hard on everyone." "I know it was hard," I said. "But I was a child. And the choices you made, the way you prioritized your new lives, left me feeling abandoned. You moved on, and it felt like you left me behind." His face flushed. He didn't have a good answer, because it was true. He had moved on, building a new family unit where I was an anomaly. "Your success is wonderful, Sarah," Dad said, seemingly trying to pivot. "You've done so well for yourself." "Yes, I have," I agreed, looking him directly in the eye. "I did it because I had to. Because I learned early on that I couldn't rely on the people who were supposed to be my foundation. The loneliness you created pushed me to find my own voice, to build my own world. That was the revenge. Not in their guilt or their discomfort, but in my strength. In the fact that I was sitting there, successful and independent, a direct result of the very circumstances they had created. Their neglect hadn't broken me. It had forged me. The conversations with both sets of parents were the beginning of a cautious, uncertain process. There were no instant fixes, no magical moments of perfect reconciliation. Building a new relationship with people who had caused such deep pain was complicated. There were more talks, some easier than others. There were apologies, some feeling more sincere than others. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about absolving them of their past actions, but about releasing myself from the anger and hurt that had held me captive for so long. My writing had been the first step in that release, a way to understand and process the pain. These conversations were another layer, allowing me to speak my truth and see the impact it had. I didn't suddenly become a fixture in their lives. The deep bonds I longed for as a child were not instantly created, but there was a tentative shift. Mom made more effort to just talk, to listen. Dad, humbled by the confrontation, seemed to genuinely try to understand. Carol remained somewhat distant, but the brittle politeness softened slightly. Jessica and Megan, now older, were curious about my life, my work. Aunt Lucy remained my rock, my true family. She celebrated my successes with genuine joy and listened patiently to the complexities of navigating these new dynamics with my parents. My career flourished. I wrote more books, each one a testament to the resilience forged in loneliness. I spoke at events, sharing my story, not as a victim, but as someone who had found strength in unexpected places. The path towards reconciliation was, and still is, long and winding. There are moments of connection, moments of awkwardness, and moments where the old hurts resurface. But I am no longer the satellite girl, orbiting their lives from a distance. I am Sarah, the author, the independent woman who built her own world, and in that world, I decide who gets a place at the table. My success wasn't about making them feel small. It was about making me feel big enough to finally face them, speak my truth, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to coexist. The greatest revenge was simply living well, thriving, and using my voice to illuminate the quiet corners where loneliness hides, showing others that even in the shadows, a fire can be built.